Late last week, as social media and TV news channels were searching for some way to make sense of the politics of the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk, a tweet from my former colleague at Vice, Elle Reeve, caught my eye. She wrote that the world of internet culture is wrapped up in so many layers of irony that it's not just going to be hard for the media to understand what the shooter really believed. He might not even know either. If anyone would understand this, it's Ellie. Ellie became a household name for her coverage of the Charlottesville, Virginia Unite the Right rally in 2017. But before that, and in the years since, she's been deeply immersed in the stranger corners of the internet. Places where oddball hobbies and ironic memes mix with some pretty extreme political views. And they sometimes emerge, in volatile fashion, into the real world. That seems to be at least part of what took place last week, when a meme-soaked shooter murdered the right-wing podcaster and political organizer Charlie Kirk, a killing that left much of the media desperately grasping for a more conventional way to interpret it. But as Ellie explains this week, the conventional terminology of politics is just no match for the messy, convoluted world of the internet. Since this is a fast-moving story, I'll just note that we spoke on Wednesday afternoon, a day after Tyler Robinson was formally charged with murder. Ellie, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really glad we can have this conversation, even though in this moment, well, it seems like if I'm going to talk to you, it's going to be a moment like this.
Generally, yeah, this has become my specialty.
This is when you hear your name bounced around the newsroom. They're like, "Where's that Ellie? Where's that blonde girl with the glasses who was in Charlottesville? How do we get her to talk about this?"
Yeah. I mean, I never really planned to cover shooters or school shooters, but it's
hmm
just this culture that I reported on has ended up producing them.
I think it's probably a mix of the specific culture you cover, but also, in a way, this is what I wanted to get into anyway, which is you have a understanding that's still pretty rare in newsrooms of not just the specifics of these subcultures, but how complicated they are and how hard they are to reduce to simple catchphrases. And I think what really caught my eye last week in the middle of all of this insanity that was going on and all these people kind of guessing at what was happening is you put out a post which I just thought like got right to it on X where you said, something along the lines of how people trying to deduce something from these little seeds we're getting about this shooter or alleged shooter are going to have a really hard time doing it because like this world is so wrapped in irony that it's possible he didn't even know what his exact positions are.
Yeah, and I'm not just asserting that about people I've covered. Like people I've interviewed have literally said that to me, either about themselves or their friends,
Yeah.
that they hide behind irony as many layers as possible so they don't really have to be accountable for what they believe. They don't have to defend it. They don't have to be cringe about
Mm.
having sincere beliefs.
Is that almost in itself the ideology? Is the sort of I mean, it's trollish for lack of a better word. It's a little nihilist. You in
Nihilist,
your book
yeah.
is I don't wanna go quite so far as like black pilled because that's sort of something else, but like which is what your book is titled. But
But it is kind of that
it is, right?
black
Like this
pilled,
idea
yeah.
of like it's sort of so far from having a belief that the lack of a real clear position is itself the ideology.
Yeah. And often you find that this idea that these people are kind of floating above, the dumb talking heads, the journalists like you and me trying to decipher these things and pin real meaning onto them. Like they think
Mhm.
they're like galaxy brain above all that.
Hmm. Do you think I mean, just thinking about, yesterday the affidavit came out and there was a reference in the text thread that was included in it to Tyler Robinson talking about sort of I can't even imagine if they what was it that he was said, "If I
Oh, I
see,
have it up actually.
notices bulge or something
It,
on
on Fox News, I'll
Fox
have a
News."
stroke.
I'll have right, which does that is that kind of what you're getting at, that there's an awareness of how this stuff is seen and
Yes.
talked about?
Yes. I just thought that statement was also so strange because it's like, but you left that behind. Like, didn't you
Yeah.
kind of know that was what was gonna happen? Wasn't that the idea? Although in this text exchange that's included in the indictment, there's some indication that he thought he was gonna get away with it.
Indication he thought he was gonna get away with it since he says something about he thought no one would he'd be old before anyone found out, but also indications that he planned it for, like, a week?
It says he planned it for a week, I believe, is what it says.
Right.
as if he has some uncertainty himself.
Yeah.
But he's also very, very fixated on getting back his gun. To
Yeah.
me, that's the part of it is the most planted in the real world. He
Mm.
keeps talking about there's far more text about getting back this rifle than there is about why he did it. And how he doesn't know how his dad will react if he's lost his grandpa's rifle.
Hmm.
I can imagine there's some family dynamic there that is would be rich to explore, but we don't have access to that yet.
I suspect, I mean, not to derail us too much, but, I've covered a lot of international terrorism, right? I spent a lot of time covering the people who get, quote, unquote, "radicalized." This was a big concept in Europe when this was happening during the war in Syria and stuff, and there were all these attacks in Belgium and things like that, in France. And sort of encountered this phenomenon where there's this attempt to try to understand what caused this person, what aspect of Islam caused this person to become violent. And I mean, a lot of people I spent time reporting on in Brussels in particular, the people I talked to would say it's the other way around, right? There's something going on in this person's life. Often they're already steeped in certain amount of criminality and other sort of violent tendencies, and the ideology comes and it's sort of cloaked around this, and it's like a convenient thing to grab onto. And I wonder if something similar happens here too.
Yes, I've seen that a lot in my reporting too. Or not even with just with violent people, but people who get into white nationalism or being incels.
Mm.
There's something else going on in their life, and this provided an answer.
Can you help us understand a little bit about what we do know about this guy, Tyler Robinson, and the memes that he put on these bullets? Like, what do you understand about what they could mean, might mean, don't mean?
So we know that he was a longtime intense video game player, a
Hmm.
gamer. We know he had a Discord account that's like a very common social media platform. It's kind of like Slack if you use that at work, where you can have group chats, one on one chats, voice chats, or video. According to posts his mom made, he got good grades, he's smart, high test scores, and he dropped out of college after the first semester. Now, that part, that is a recurring theme with a lot of the people I interviewed, the dropping
Mm.
out of college, because the way they think of themselves is as really smart but unable to adapt socially.
Mm.
Now, with Robinson, there's a lot more pictures of him doing stuff outside than you normally see, like camping,
Right.
doing stuff with his family, going to restaurants. And most of the people I've reported on have retreated from the world more than that. At least the incels, maybe not as much the white nationalists. So anyway, so what he put on the shell casings, they were all plausibly video game references. One, it's a little bit more ambiguous, but the first cartridge says, "Notice his bulge. Oh, whoa, what's this?" That's a
Hmm.
furry meme. It's 10 years old. It's a cartoon that depicts two kind of like unattractive middle aged men role playing online as like cute, sexy furries. Um, so it is a derogatory meme about furries. It's like a sexual thing where you pretend to be anthropomorphic animals. Um,
Okay.
but it has also been reclaimed in some places by furries. So that's one thing you could take one of two ways, or some other uncountable other way that he could have possibly meant it. Oh whoa is an emoticon that's kind of like really cute surprise. Notice his bullshit. What's this? By the way, that refers to an erection. So I saw Ted Cruz recently say it was transgender. No, it's not that. It's this very specific meme.
I see. Okay. Because that may have been the one that was most plausible for some people. Like, oh, this is a transgender reference in some way, but that's just not necessarily what it is. I mean, who knows, right? Again, all these things are incredibly wrapped in irony, but
Right.
that's not the most obvious takeaway.
Right. Well, that line is directly from this like image.
Uh-huh.
So one guy is saying, I don't remember what sexy thing, and the other guy is responding with, "Notice his bulge. Oh, what's this?" I mean, it's all very silly, right? Except when you consider the sick fact that he wrote it on weaponry before killing someone.
Yeah.
The second cartridge says "Hey Fascist Catch," and then has arrow symbols that in the video game Helldivers 2 bring in the biggest bomb in the game. And Helldivers 2 is one of these, like, it's kind of like ironically fascist, like Starship Troopers. You could take that as maybe it is what it looks like on the surface, anti-fascist, but we don't know. The third cartridge is says "Oh Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao Ciao." So that is a anti-fascist song from Italy from World War II. All my sources who were World War II buffs knew that reference immediately. I've heard that it's popular among anti-fascists, but like I never heard it. And I spent weeks in Portland during the 2020 protests. I never heard that. I never heard a reference to that, but maybe I just missed it. Anyway, it is in a video game, but it was also in this Netflix show called Money Heist. And if you click on the song in TikTok, you'll just find a million people doing like goofy dances to it.
I think, and this is maybe the intent. I'm so lost sitting here being like, okay, I know where we're heading, right? I mean, that's the experience of hearing this broken down like this.
Yeah. In the song, at least the one that is very popular on TikTok, when they sing it at the chow 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 part, you hear like the cocking of a gun. Like, okay. And so there is like a sort of violent undertone to it. But again, like there's all these TikTok videos of people like ordering coffee and dancing around. So whatever. And then the fourth cartridge says, if you read this, you're gay, LMAO. It's like, it's so absurd.
Yeah.
And especially just imagining a grizzled law enforcement officer, you know, in his like official jacket, bending down and reading that.
Oh, I've already seen the memes of that. I mean, there's already people making jokes about that exact thing happening, right?
Exactly. Like that was probably the most mass culture reference put on. It's the one that like, okay, everyone gets that one. And it even happened when prosecutors had their press conference talking about the indictment, and they read that, and it's this like older man in a gruff voice saying LMAO.
Right. So one of the things that happened last week as this stuff was coming out is then, and I think Bella Ciao contributed to this maybe as much as any, then there began to be this sort of searching around that maybe instead of having kind of left-leaning tendencies, this guy has very far right tendencies and is something called a groiper. And I think you were one of the people, this may even be when you wrote your post on X, like you're one of the people who was saying, let's slow our roll on this, assuming this. I think you said on TV that they're grasping at vapor, trying to draw that conclusion. Like what were you, like why were you trying to slow people down with that?
I mean, I could explain the basis for that, which is groypers are followers of the far-right podcaster Nick Fuentes. He's like not even on YouTube. He's on Rumble because he's been kicked off so many platforms, though he is back on X. They are characterized by a kind of grotesque, obese, smug Pepe the Frog. So people saw pictures of Tyler Robinson dressed for Halloween in an Adidas tracksuit doing a squat with like a little newsboy cap.
Right. And his mom said, this is some meme.
This guy from a meme. Well, someone found a picture of a Pepe the Frog in the Adidas tracksuit doing the squat. And they're like, this is it. He's a groiper. Because Fuentes had long had this feud with Charlie Kirk. That Kirk is not far right enough on immigration, gay rights, and I don't even know if you call it right or left on Israel. Fuentes is very anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. And Fuentes' followers would constantly be harassing Kirk at these public events, like these college speaking tours, trying to ask him these leading questions to get him to talk about those issues, or at least get people in the crowd to Google various anti-Israel ideas. So people are like, this is it. It was actually the right wingers. It was one of their own.
Right.
But the Pepe the Frog in the tracksuit is actually itself a reference to the Slav squat meme, which is this idea that Eastern Europeans tend to pose like that in tracksuits in photos, which is like itself a very old meme.
And so once again, there's simply no way of knowing just by looking at it at what stage in this meme's development he is connecting to when he makes this Halloween costume and takes this picture.
The other thing is, like, a lot of these sort of political actors, like mass shooters, when they have a political message, it's pretty clear. There's
Mm-hmm.
like a manifesto about the great replacement, like
Right.
the memes written on the gun are about that. Now, often those messages are directed back at like their inner circle online and not so much the wider world. But I mean, there is this kind of weird, like I hesitate to attribute motivations, but from the outside, it looks like a desire to be famous to that online circle
Mm-hmm.
more than to be to the rest of the world.
You
So
mean
like
that for you mean that for other cases, or do you mean that in this
yes, for
case?
other
Yeah. Yeah.
cases. I don't know exactly. I mean, we just don't know enough about Robinson. But like the Christchurch shooter, he posted the live stream of his murders on 8chan. Like the memes were for the people on 8chan.
I mean, I think just like thinking back to the last week now, essentially of trying to cover this, I think that's part of what's so hard for journalists who are trying to do this, particularly if they aren't as familiar with this sort of type of the genre of coverage as you are, is we need to get some answer. We all need to understand what he was trying to do. Like, what's the motivation? What's the political message? Even if you're not an extreme politician who's trying to use it to advocate for some cause, which now seems to be everybody, even if you're just a journalist who's trying to explain it, right? Everyone loves explainers. It's very frustrating time. It's a very difficult time, but maybe you don't experience it quite that same way because you are a little more used to this.
I mean, I still have to double check. I just knew where to Google for what the oh whoa meme went. I mean, I was just thinking about this today. It's like it's not time efficient. Like it takes too much time to learn all this stuff to be able to deliver an analysis to people in the time span that they want it. Like
Hmm.
because at the same day there as the Kirk shooting, there was another mass shooter in Colorado. And it
Yeah.
wasn't that long ago there was the one at the Annunciation School in Minnesota.
Hmm.
And that one was really wild. That one, the person left behind a YouTube of them going through a notebook they had written that had a lot of writing in English but with Cyrillic letters, which is this
Yeah,
whole
that's
other
right.
online
That's right.
subculture. Right? So, like, to learn enough about it to be able to describe it factually, to be able to sort through the irony, it takes a really long time. And unfortunately, by the time you've got it figured out, there's been another mass casualty event.
Mm-hmm. Well, to put on sort of a media critic hat, if you can, right? And I actually think, look, I CNN had you on to talk about this. I think the network did a pretty good job when it could, and all these networks are going to do the best they can, but they're also burdened with having to fill 24 hours, so that's always just going to be hard.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you think there's a problem in just the way our media is structured, that there just aren't enough people who understand this stuff.
Yeah, I think we haven't been taking the internet seriously long enough.
Hmm.
And there's also, I think, a tendency to want to interview the important people, the senators and the congressmen, and those people are kind of downstream from all this stuff. Like you see these like it's like kind of embarrassing when there's like based Mike Lee is the senator's
Hmm.
Twitter account, and it's like based like that's a pretty old meme. It was like really popular with the alt right like 10 years ago, and
Right.
like those guys are not driving the culture, and they're not even driving politics. They're constantly trying to play catch up. But they're the important ones, and they're the ones who will show their face. So they're the ones who are being interviewed about the day's events and what they mean.
Do you think this is a place where this new ecosystem of TikTok news and sort of Twitch news influencers maybe have an opportunity to sort of seize something? Like I found TikTok pretty. I mean, TikTok doesn't do original deep investigative reporting, right? So let's set that aside for a second, because clearly that's something that you would lose. But I found TikTok more useful for trying to understand particularly these memes and this internet culture than a lot of other things I was seeing online.
Yeah, I thought TikTok was pretty good too, mostly because it was young people speaking from their experience of like lurking in irony poisoned online communities.
Hmm.
I mean, it was from TikTok that I found this manifesto, this incel manifesto called transmaxing. The
Okay.
idea that like beta males, men who are not like the sort of John Wayne archetype, will never be valued by society. So they can purely for self improvement to improve their status in society, they can transition to women and then be appreciated for being pretty. And they can also get cheaper car insurance and talk about their feelings
Uh, okay.
instead of like the sort of traditional concept of being born in the wrong body.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was the youths that led me to that.
Huh. I mean, it's an interesting moment for. I mean, I think we're always sort of. I'm certainly always watching to see when's gonna be this moment where these other ways of getting information kind of overtake the major networks. I don't think they have the financial resources to, but certainly this was a time where I just thought, if I want to understand this, I'm not going to get it from.
From Ted Cruz.
Yeah, maybe not. Or Chris Murphy, right? Like,
No. I mean, and of course they have jobs to do. Why would they be in these worlds? Ideally, they're like thinking about the budget and foreign policy and stuff, but yeah, I know when it's just when there's no information and but everybody wants to think about this one thing all the time, so you're just chewing over it over and over and over again. It's not the political pundits who have the good information. It's like an 18-year-old who wants to talk about their ex-extremism journey.
right. Can we talk a little bit about Charlie Kirk also?
Yeah.
Because I think something similar has gone on with the media's attempt to make sense of him. This is my theory about this, but it it seems like the world he inhabited was another subculture that mainstream reporters who have not been steeped in it are having a really hard time figuring out how to define it. Um,
Yeah.
and I wonder what you've sort of seen in terms of that
I, hon-
struggle.
I honestly, I felt like there was a lot of bullshitting.
Yeah.
I felt like that people had not actually watched his videos or listened to his podcast, and they didn't know what it was all about. I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of a mix. I interviewed like 6 young Republicans
Hmm.
in the East Village in New York. Like, so you would conceive of these people as the more liberal conservatives, right?
Yeah.
And like a couple of them were gay. There was elaborate art depicting penises all over the wall. They thought of Charlie Kirk as a moderate. And not because of ignorance. They knew very well the positions he had taken that have sort of bubbled up on social media. But because the rest of the internet in the conservative world, there's so many people who are much further out there, like Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
But Charlie, so I interviewed him back at Vice in 2018 when he was like 24 and he had like no staff. He had an appearance at Colorado State University, and there was a big fight between white nationalists and anti-fascists outside. And he like fled, skipped town. We ended up doing an interview in a hotel room at 1 in the morning.
I remember those days at Vice.
And I don't have the transcript of it, and that piece never ran. But
Oh
I
no.
know from my producer's notes, which I dug up furiously after this happened, like I kept pressing him on, but like, why do you think these white nationalists are showing up at your event? Like, what do you think it means? And that was before he'd had this kind of war with Nick Fuentes. But like, he was part of this genre of going to these colleges and kind of picking on kids. I
Hmm.
mean, he would debate these kids, not necessarily in the spirit of generosity. The kids would show up and, yeah, they're probably not that informed. They're 18, they're emotional, they don't know they're not trained in debate. And so they'd go and try to make their case, and Kirk would, own them.
Yep.
And those clips would go viral on the internet. And there are like tons of imitators who would do the same thing. Ben Shapiro, Michael
Hmm.
Knowles, Steven Crowder. And it's not really picking a fair fight. So I understand there's a lot of reporters who talked about Charlie Kirk as being very polite and generous with his time, and that was true. I found that to be true too, but let's not forget the kind of stuff he was putting out.
And I think there's often a kind of uh, I'll call it double speak for lack of a better word, where he was really good at talking about things like being a peacemaker, about dialogue. He talked about wanting to prevent revolution, and if we stop talking, we have violence, and all that. Those are like good values, and I am willing to believe and accept that a part of him really felt that way. But it's also true and clear from watching the videos that I don't think I saw a lot of videos. I mean, I can't remember one, but I could be wrong, where he fundamentally changed his mind because of something someone said to him, right? Like that was not the point of those videos.
No, no, he's not going to learn from the students. Although you can absolutely make the argument that he did get pulled further and further to the right, like on immigration. Like when I interviewed him, he called himself
Mm,
a conservatarian. Like he was supposed to be cool with gays. And there was this big moment where he was on the stage with Rob Smith, a gay veteran. Like his whole brand was he can't be canceled because he was a gay black veteran, right? So
yeah,
he thinks he's defending himself from attacks from the left, and then up come these like far right Fuentes fans who are like, where does the Bible condone anal sex? They're asking very provocative and not fair spirited questions, trying to put Kirk on the spot. And he did go further right on gay rights and very much not so nice about trans people.
no, certainly not, right? I mean, he was pretty clear about his position, at least at various times.
I mean, in his podcast, he had on as a guest Steve Saylor. This is a guy who calls himself a race realist. His whole thing is like black people evolved to have lower IQs than white people. Like he had that guy on as a guest.
Hmm.
It's like a jawbreaker of a problem, like where there's like a bunch of layers because it's like people are misunderstanding him as a moderate. People are thinking of him as a moderate for the New York Times reader, which is not true. And yet, within the young conservative world, he is a moderate just because of how far right some of the other voices are.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Like it's that term moderate or whatever, extremist, which is another the other side of it. These are terms that really are context specific. I think in the same way that the media, the mainstream media, which is such a useless term, but whatever, we'll use it, has struggled over Tyler Robbins, and I think there's a similar struggle when you are not steeped in this world enough to know who all these players are and how these pieces move. It's just very hard to look at it and be like, "Oh yeah, here's who Charlie Kirk was. Here's what you need to know in the 2 sentences that I have to deliver it in."
Right. Yeah, because my cousin texted me that she hadn't heard of Charlie Kirk until the assassination.
Mm.
There's this whole
Mhm.
other world that doesn't even know about it.
Yeah, one
I mean,
forgets about that.
it's his legacy is really important because he was a very big deal. Like I went to a 2023 conference of his where all the candidates were there except for Ron DeSantis. And there's like fireworks on stage, like big production. And like Charlie was like not exactly a kingmaker, right? He's not bigger than Trump himself, but he was like so important to get, the nod from all these candidates.
Mhm.
And Megyn Kelly was there, and it was almost like he was saying, like, "Oh, we're letting Megyn Kelly back in now." Like, she
Mm.
was out because
Mhm.
she was against Trump, but, like, now she's back in.
Right.
And since that time, Kelly has gotten much more influence and a much bigger audience than she had when she was in the wilderness.
Can I ask you a question before I let you go?
Yeah,
Just about your work in
yeah,
general. I made a sort of joking, but it was knowing reference to the blonde girl with glasses.
yeah.
In your book, you write that shampoo and conditioner is not how you ended up talking to the people you talk to and the way you talk to them. But I guess I wonder if you could share a little about how you approach conversations that you've had with people with really strong opinions, often quite harsh towards you personally or towards people like you.
Well, it's not so foreign to me because of where I grew up.
Hmm.
Like, in my teen years, I lived in a small town in Tennessee, and we had some rough experiences. It was also very Christian, very conservative. And I would watch particularly conservatives, like mainstream, your Bill Kristol conservatives, back when everything was different. I would watch them talking about the people they represented and be like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what the people here are like. And actually, in 2024, I was interviewing people who run the Bulwark, this Never Trumper
Mm-hmm.
sort of podcast, newsletter network that's very successful. And of course, they do great work. I'm not trying to detract from it, but some of them were ex Republicans, and it's like, it was so hard for me to not just be like, you just be directly mad at them. Like, I knew who your people were. They were
Mm,
talking about how they hadn't been out talking to the voters and really understanding the anger and resentment. And I was like,
mm-hmm.
I knew. I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, well, what I talk about in my book is that this guy stalked and harassed my family for a couple years when I was a teenager and did truly insane things where even as a kid, I knew he'd be trying to intimidate us, and I was thinking like, "Wow, this guy is such a weirdo."
But I think that's a very important reaction, right? Like, you were not cowering. Your reaction was, like, kind of curiosity. Like, there's an element of intrigue to calling a person like that a weirdo as opposed to something else.
Well, you also just, like, learn in these fights, it's not pure aggression that always wins in the argument, it's, like, the perfectly delivered, casually delivered
Mm.
word or turn of phrase that can be the kind of unlock, that, like, super secret ninja touch that causes someone to crumple to the ground.
Do you think of the interviews that you would have with, like, Chris Cantwell, for example? I mean, Charlottesville, but people in that vein. Do you think of them as a kind of verbal combat?
Oh, I mean, they do. Yeah. So, like, yes and no. So they wanna own a lib.
Mhm.
They would love it if I would cry. I mean, that would be huge. They wanna make me look stupid, but also kind of like I'm panicking, like
Mm,
I'm
mhm.
grasping for, like, the catechisms of mainstream liberalism, and I can't remember all my lines, like, that's what they're looking for.
Right.
But I'm not looking for my version of that. I'm looking to get them to say the most revealing thing about their true motivations and their true intentions, to get the mask to slip a little bit,
Mm.
from their, like, most perfectly presented version of themselves. So,
Well, so I think of that as a kind of curiosity, but I don't think you're describing, like, a benign curiosity. You're describing a more pointed form of curiosity.
yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess it's just I've always just felt like I know enough to know there's more there.
Mm,
There's
mhm.
more there than just the little bit that was on the news. I mean, I'm not that different in some ways from the young people who look down upon the mainstream media coverage. Like, I would also consume that news angry at like and frustrated when I was younger, like when I was in college, especially.
Yeah.
You know, I was in college during the 2004 election, and I felt like, and we got free subscriptions to the New York Times, and I felt like every single red pickup truck in Missouri where I lived had been chronicled by the New York Times as
Yeah.
like, this like perfect embodiment of rugged American authentic masculinity, and I just like, oh, someday I'm going to go out there and I'm going to show what it really is.
Yeah, but I think what emerges from these conversations, like, you're not engaged in, I mean, I know I've used words like kind of combat, but, like, you're not doing it in a way where the goal is the final put down. The goal is something revealing about the person. And often, and I know you've talked about this in the past, often what that looks like is moments that are that other person in their most raw and passionate way form, so that when you put it on TV, Fox News can pick it up and say, "Ah, CNN girl gets shut down," right? I mean, you
Yeah.
set yourself up for that in those moments, but that's success to you, right?
Yeah. Oh God, every time that happens, like, it's really interesting. Like, I did this story on this Florida boat parade, Panama
Mhm.
City.
Yeah.
And this guy, look, I'm picking the clips. I'm picking the quotes, okay? This guy is double fisting drinks, shirtless. He's got like wraparound shades. He's got this kind of gruff voice. I'm like, so listen, let me ask a maybe not so polite question, but why are you so mad about inflation if you can afford a boat? It's
Right.
like pretty expensive. He's like, listen, nobody gave me shit. You know, I have to fight our standards people to like, please don't bleep shit. It sounds so satisfying the way he like says it.
Yeah.
Then Fox News airs it because they can't conceive of an act of journalism that is not an intentional act of propaganda. Right. So they cannot conceive, or at least the people who clipped this for their show and were angry at me for making this guy look cool, that they agree with. They
Making the
agree
guy
with
look
him.
cool.
They think he looks cool. Somehow I did something wrong. Right. They think I
Yeah.
must have been a mistake.
Yeah.
So like, no, I'm trying to present the reality of our fellow Americans in the most like interesting, arresting way. Also, just to be clear, I view a guy like that, you know, a Trump supporter with a boat, very differently than like an incel. Just,
Yes.
it must be stated.
Yes. Well, Ellie, thank you so much. It's really nice talking to you.
Yeah, fun talking to you too.
The Kicker is brought to you by the Columbia Journalism Review and produced by Amanda Dara. I'm your host, Josh Hirsch.